Welcome back to the ICD-1 series, and in this video we'll look at port security. Okay, so why do we need port security? So by default, Cisco switches have no control over what devices we can connect to it, in that by default Cisco switch has no security limiting what devices we can connect to it. And this causes a massive security risk. So that means that we can connect any device to a Cisco switch. So in this case, imagine we have our work devices that connect to our switch. By default, there's no security mechanism in place to stop a malicious person from coming in, disconnecting our trusted devices and introducing a rogue device into our network. Now that rogue device could be carrying a virus which could infect our network, or that rogue device could be another switch, allowing the attacker to capture packets as they move through our network, or allowing the attacker to direct traffic to what's called a to packet capturing software. So the most important thing to realize is that by default there's no security mechanism in place to control what devices connect to our switch, meaning that any device can connect to our switch. And again, this causes a security risk. Now with port security allows us to control what devices we can connect to our switch. So with port security, we can only allow trusted devices that we own, that we have administrative control over. We can just say that we want only those devices to connect to our switch, and we can stop rogue devices from connecting to our switch and infecting our network. So with port security, we can say, imagine we have these ports. So port security is configured on a per port basis. Imagine this is port 1, this is port 2. We could say that with port security, only device A can connect to port 1, and only device B can connect to port 2. That means that this switch expects to only receive frames from device A from port 1, and this switch only expects to receive frames from device B via port 2. If another device connects out any one of those ports, traffic will be blocked. And the way we can control what devices can connect to our port is through the MAC address of that device. So each device has a unique MAC address, and when the switch receives frames, it can tell whether those frames were sent by a trusted device by looking at the source MAC address of that frame. So in this case, device A would have a MAC address. In this case, imagine it's the MAC address of all ones. Now when switch, in this case switch 1, receives frames from device A, it knows that those frames would be sourced from the MAC address of all ones. That means that if this switch, for whatever reason, receives frames via port 1 with a different source MAC address, it knows that those are from an untrusted device because they're not from the same MAC address as device A, and it will drop those packets. With port security, we can also control how many devices can connect off each port. So in this case, we can control how many trusted devices can connect off a single port. And so the way it works is that if we exceed the number of trusted devices on a single port, then traffic from the exceeding devices is blocked. And by default, port security only allows us to connect a single device of each port. So in this case, to demonstrate this, imagine if we had a switch-to-switch connection over here, and let's say we had 4 devices, so PCA, PCB, PCC, PCD, and this is let's say we configure port security on switch 1, and specifically we configure port security on this interface over here. Now we limit this interface to 3 MAC addresses. This means that we can have 3 trusted devices that connect off this port. So we're going to allow traffic sourced from 3 different devices, 3 trusted devices. So in this case, imagine these 3 devices are trusted devices. This is a untrusted device. The way that we can define which devices are trusted is either statically by configuring what MAC addresses are trusted MAC addresses, or by sticky learning, which is a feature which allows the switch to dynamically learn the MAC addresses. But for whatever reason, these 3 devices are the trusted devices. This means that when the switch receives frames sourced from PCA, PCB, or PCC. This switch over here is going to allow those frames to pass through and is going to process those frames. If it receives a frame from device D, because that frame exceeds the number of allowed MAC addresses on this interface, the switch is going to drop packets. So the way it works is that we configure the number of allowed source MAC addresses. So in this case 3. That means that in this case PCA, PCB, PCC, we're allowing 3 different devices to connect off that port and giving those devices the ability to send and receive data, and the switch will process data received from those devices. If we added a 4th device in, because that exceeds the number of MAC addresses allowed on this port from different devices, that traffic will be blocked. So how does port security work? So with port security, we associate a specific MAC address with an interface. So we are saying that this MAC address is a trusted MAC address, and by saying it's a trusted MAC address, it means that the device with that MAC address is a trusted device, and that device can connect to our switch on that port and send data into that port. And like I said before, frames sourced with that MAC address are processed by the switch. Frames sourced with a different MAC address are dropped. So imagine this is our switch and we have device A over here. If we configure device A as a trusted device by configuring its MAC address as trusted, it means frames sourced from device A will be allowed into the switch for processing. If for some reason somebody removed device A and introduced a rogue device, frames sourced from that rogue device will have a different MAC address than device A. That means that when those frames come into the port, the switch will see that those frames are sourced with a different MAC address. It's not a trusted MAC address, and those frames will be dropped by the switch. The switch will not process those frames any further. And with port security, the action the switch takes for offending traffic. So offending traffic is traffic sourced from a a untrusted device. From traffic with a source MAC address which isn't defined as a trusted MAC address. The action the switch will take will depend on the violation mode we have configured on that device. So the violation modes define how the switch will react when it receives offending traffic. So with port security, we can also limit the number of MAC addresses allowed on the interface, which can control how many devices can connect off a single interface. So normally we would only have 1 device of each port on a switch. However, if we have port to port, not port to port, sorry, if we have switch to switch connections, it means that we can have we can have frames sourced from different MAC addresses coming in via a single interface. And so if we wanted to configure port security on this interface, we would have to set we would have to change the maximum number of allowed MAC addresses on the interface to see how many devices we have connected to this switch over here, or connected off the interface. So in this case, if we had 5 devices, let's say three devices, then we would configure the maximum number of MAC addresses at 3. This means that this switch expects to receive frames sourced from 3 different MAC addresses, which means that these are all trusted devices. So if the switch receives a frame from any of these devices, it will accept that frame and process it. If we add in a 4th device, because the number of MAC addresses associated with the interface now exceeds 3, so it's going to be 4, it means that traffic sourced from this 4th device is going to be dropped. And because a violation has occurred, the switch will take an action depending on the violation mode which has been configured for that port. So with the maximum number of MAC addresses, it's easier when we get to the configuration of port security to understand how it works. But just for now, know that a switch associates a number of MAC addresses with an interface. With the maximum allowed MAC addresses in port security, it defines the number of MAC addresses the switch is allowed to accept frame from. So the number of different source MAC addresses the switch is allowed to accept frames from that come into this port. And when we exceed that number, a violation occurs, and traffic from the violating MAC addresses is dropped. So with the violation modes, there are 3 different violation modes for port security. There's protect, restrict, and shutdown. So with the protect mode, traffic from the offending MAC address is discarded, but no counters are incremented and no system messages are displayed. With the restrict mode, traffic sourced from the offending MAC address is dropped, and a violation counters are incremented on show commands. A system message is also displayed as well. With shutdown, traffic sourced from the offending MAC address is discarded and the port is shut down. So draw a very basic example over here. So with protect mode, imagine this is device A. If someone plugged in a rogue device into this port, that means that traffic from that rogue device will be dropped, so the switch will drop the traffic, but it's not going to increment what we call the counters in the show command. So there's some show commands which show you how many violations have occurred for port security on this port. Those counters will not be incremented and no system messages will be displayed on the console, which means that it's very difficult in protect mode to tell whether a violation has occurred on this port, whether a untrusted device is trying to send traffic, or whether we have exceeded the maximum number of MAC addresses that we can associate with this port. With the restrict mode, if this was a rogue device, traffic would be discarded, but also the violations counter for the show commands will be incremented and the system messages will be displayed as well, which means that we will be able to see whether a violation has occurred. Now with restrict and protect mode, once we connect back the trusted device into our switch, traffic from the trusted device will be allowed to flow through the switch and will be processed by the switch. But with shutdown mode, not only is traffic sourced from the offending MAC address is dropped, but traffic sourced from any device is dropped because that port is put into the shutdown mode. That means that if we were, imagine this the rogue device, if we were to unplug the rogue device and plug back in our trusted device, traffic from our trusted device would be dropped as well because that port is shut down. Now the only way to bring that port back up is to do a shutdown and no shutdown sequence in order to bring the port back up, allowing traffic from the trusted device to flow through the switch. So to configure port security, we need to associate a MAC address or multiple MAC addresses to an interface to a port. Now we can statically associate a MAC address to an interface by using the switchport MAC address command. So we're statically telling the switch what MAC addresses it expects to see on that interface when frames coming into that interface. And if we configured so if there was only one device which connected off that port, it means that we would only configure one of these commands. If there was 4 or 5, it means that we would have to configure this command 4 or 5 times for that port, saying that these are the MAC addresses you expect to see on this interface. If you see any other MAC addresses, then drop that traffic. As well as statically telling the switch to what MAC addresses it expects to see on that port, we can tell the switch to learn the MAC addresses via sticky learning, and then to save that in the running config file, so that it will remember the MAC addresses it expects to see on the port, even when it's been shut down and then turned on again. So the way we can do that is by using the switchport port security MAC address sticky command. So this command tells the switch that I want you to take note of the source MAC address of incoming frames, and I want you to associate that MAC address as the trusted MAC address for the interface that you receive the frame on. So imagine this is our switch, this is our PC. As this PC is sending traffic in case PCA, this switch 1 is going to learn the source MAC address associated with the interface as a trusted MAC address, and it's going to save that in the running config file. So that now and if you copy the running config to the startup config file, it means that when the switch boots up again, it's going to retain the information that it's just learned. And so with this way, we wouldn't have to statically assign a MAC address to each interface. Imagine this was a switch connection, and we had 20 devices that we expect to receive traffic from out via this interface. Instead of configuring that statically, we can just tell the switch to learn the MAC address and just save it in the running config file, so that it retains that information when it next boots up. So We can limit the number of secure MAC addresses allowed on the interface with the switchboard port security maximum number command. And again, we're just telling the switch that this is the number of MAC addresses that you can expect to see on the interface, a different number of MAC addresses. And if we exceed that number, then traffic from the offending MAC addresses will be dropped. So by that I mean, imagine we have switch over here. We have at the moment we have two devices. We have a switch connection over here. And let's say that we configure the maximum number of MAC addresses for this port too. That means that as long as we only have two devices that are sending traffic into this port, that's fine. That means the switch will process traffic from the two devices, in case device A and device B. Device A and device B will be known as trusted devices. The switch over here will trust packet source from the MAC address of device A and device B, because those MAC addresses. So at the moment, the switch is associating two MAC addresses with this interface, and the maximum number of MAC addresses it can associate with this interface via port security is 2. So it's not exceeding the limit of MAC addresses it can associate with this interface. However, if we added in a third device, that means that this switch would have learned or would have associated 3 MAC addresses with this interface, which means that we're exceeding the number of maximum, which means we're exceeding the maximum number of MAC addresses allowed to be learned on this interface, allowed to be associated with this interface. That means traffic from this device is going to be dropped by this switch. The switch will not process packets from, let's say, device C. It will drop it, but it will process packets from device A and device B. And depending on the violation mode, it may even drop packets from device A and device B if this mode is shut down. And so to configure port security, to actually turn the port security feature on, we have to use the switchboard port security command. So we can configure the MAC addresses that we expect, we can configure a maximum limit. But if we don't use the switchboard port security command, it means that port security will not be enabled, which means our configuration will not take effect. And we can change the violation mode by using the switchboard port security violation command. We can change it to protect, restrict, or shut down. So we have reached the end of this video, and we've seen the fundamentals and the theory behind the port security feature. In the next video, we're going to continue on from where we left off, and we're going to configure the port security feature on a switch. I hope it's been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.